Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. My name is Dishal, I'm a second year and I will be one of your co-MCs.
I'm Tara. Woo! Yeah, Dishal! I'm the fourth year and I will be an MC as well. Just ran from work, so it might be weird sweaty and stuff, but that's fine.
So basically how this is going to run, we're going to have a 1-minute introduction for each of the candidates, and we have another mic here. Let's just turn it on. There's going to be a 1-minute introduction, and Sophia's going to give me time signals, so I will notify each of you. So you get 2 minutes for each question after the introduction, and you have a 1-minute conclusion, that's 2 minutes, and also at the very end, after we open the questions up to the audience, there's going to be a final conclusion as to why we should vote for each of you. Let's see, so without further ado.
All right, so our first question is, in what ways will students be affected if Measure E and F are passed? Oh, wait, definitely. Who are you? I don't even want to read off that. Like, tell us your background, how you know Isla Vista, and what you've done for this community.
So, do I just pass the mic on?
Yeah.
Cool. My name is Andrew Gabriel Pragin, and I have been involved in Isla Vista community stuff for the past year and a quarter, I would say. So I got involved actually in Isla Vista stuff, community organizing, I guess you could call it, with the 83 process actually, the bill that created this opportunity to vote on the CSD. And then I got involved in the community center process, and I've continued to be involved in that, and have continued to be involved in things like Jeffrey's Jazz Coffee House events and Isla Vista Open Lab. For example, they put on Isla Vista First Fridays, so alternative support opportunity. I'm here so that we can give Isla Vista a voice, because powers that be need to be told things, and you need to elect representatives to tell them things.
Hello, my name is Michael Kile. I've been in this area for about 5 years, in IB for 3. I originally was more involved in educational outreach as a chemical engineering major through various middle schools and elementary schools in the area. However, with the Bernie Sanders campaign and getting involved in the Million Student Marches, I found myself just in a complete torrent of getting involved in everything I get my hands on, such that within a month I was occupying the Chancellor's office with other members in the Latinx community to push on the reforms that are happening as we speak right now with the first family weekend UCSB's ever held for the Latinx community coming up in a week. From there, I've just been involved within the community itself, the noise ordinance meetings, but really my other big thing was that I was an alternate at-large delegate for the Bernie Sanders campaign and went to the DNC to represent the votes of voters in California to try to push an alternative voice within the Democratic Party. And as is, I'm just here as an alternative. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jon Hedges. I came to Isla Vista when Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president, so you can do the math. That's a very long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I have raised my family here, and even a couple of the grandkids were at least partly raised here. And I am thoroughly committed to the community of Isla Vista. Though sometimes it's been an ill-favored place, it has been my home. Throughout my time here, I have advocated for those on the margins, those who did not have a voice, and recently realized that, as a matter of fact, the whole community had not had a voice. I have known Das Williams since he was quite young, and some of the ideas for Assembly Bill 3 I might have had some contribution to very early on. And it's time for us to have a voice. I'm honored to be with this slate of folks over here to my right.
Hi everybody, my name is Spencer Brandt. I'm a second year History and Public Policy major here at UCSB. and I'm running for one of the 4-year seats on the Community Services District. The reason why I decided to run was because I got involved in the self-governance movement about a year ago to the day. I started going to the meetings as a photographer with the Daily Nexus. Usually what you do on those assignments is just show up, snap a couple pictures, and leave. But I was really energized by the fact that there was so much community and local government policy being made, rather esoteric details being parsed out in meetings that were happening each week. So since then, one of the things I've been involved with is hosting the Noise Ordinance Community Meeting over the summer, where over 100 people came out and spoke their opposition to the proposed amendment from the Sheriff's Office. I'm really proud to be running with the endorsement of Assemblymember Das Williams, with the support of the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party, with the support of the Sierra Club, the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee, and of course, most importantly, Ethan, Natalie, and Father John as well. So thank you.
Okay, guys, when I raise my hand, that's like 10 more seconds. Okay.
10 more seconds?
Yeah.
And then pass it on? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I'll raise my hand again. It's like half the stuff.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Natalie Jordan. I'm a third-year UCSB student and the current internal vice president of Associated Students. I am running for a 2-year seat on the Isla Vista Community Service District Board of Directors. Some things I feel super passionate about are community engagement, parking, and then tenant mediation, details, and housing. I am proud to be running alongside Spencer, Father John, and Ethan, and I've also been endorsed by the Democratic Party, the Democratic Women of Santa Barbara, Campus Democrats. I look forward to letting you know a little bit more about my plans this year. Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening everybody. My name is Ethan Bertrand and I'm running for the permanent 2-year seat on the Isla Vista Community Services District Board of Directors. I currently serve you as one of the directors of the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District, and before that I was the inaugural Isla Vista Community Representative for the Santa Barbara City College Associated Students. My top 3 priorities for the CSD are to make it a safer place through our police protection power, to make it a more fair place to rent through our tenant mediation program, and to amplify the voice and will of Isla Vistans through the Municipal Advisory Council and Area Planning Commission. I'm proud to be running alongside Father Jon-Stephen Hedges, Spencer Grant, and Natalie Jordan. Also proud to have the support of the Democratic Party, the Sierra Club, the Women's Political Committee, and Democratic Women. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to discussing the details.
Hi, I'm Jay Freeman. You may recognize me from such uphill political battles as jailbreaking the iPhone and running for 3rd District County Supervisor. I'm also well known for preparing 3 minutes worth of content that I typically read off of something in 1 minute, but I didn't prepare anything today. I've been involved in the local politics here for the last 2 years since the tragic events of 2014. I started attending some political meetings such as the Public Safety Commission, and then I was attending Students for Safer Isla Vista. There were some meetings outside of the food co-op. I started attending meetings for construction of 83. I started running meetings. I ran meetings related to parking in the area. I've got involved in the community center project, about the first half of the phase of them working on that. So I've been attending many meetings, and I think I've got a pretty good breadth of what's going on and the issues that are in the area. Thank you.
Perfect. You can actually hold on to the mic and we'll just start in that direction. Yeah, just to make it, and then we'll keep switching off. So our very first question: in what ways will students be affected if measures E and F are passed? 2 minutes.
In what ways will students be affected? Well, one way is that students will be paying clearly the 8% utility tax. Another way, though, is that they will get a government in response to that tax. That government will have 8 powers, which will include Municipal Advisory Council funding, Area Planning Commission funding, having a parking permit program, having contracting for additional police services, doing graffiti abatement, street side lighting and landscaping, sidewalks, possibility of doing, thank you, community facilities, and then doing, landlord-tenant housing mediation services. And so these are all services that are things that came out of a series of meetings in the community of things that people felt would solve, at least in some part way, problems that we have in the area. Many of these are things that we will require going to the Board of Supervisors in order to either activate or possibly even just configure and control. But it will give us some say in how they get constructed because we will be doing the funding for them. As far as actual concrete changes, it's something where it's difficult for me to promise anything right now because we'll be arguing about that when the board actually happens. I think we all have these slightly different visions for what to do with, for example, a contract for additional policing power. One thing is that I'll say is that being on the board, after having run a number of meetings related to parking, I am not gung-ho about trying to establish a parking permit program very quickly. Despite the fact that I was helping some of the people early before running those meetings, we should look at the parking permit program. Ran the meetings, learned a lot more about the process, and came out of that with an appreciation for the complexity, the time scale, and then in some ways the usefulness of it. The California League of City Planners, for example, has stated that within 5 years, enough people using self-driving cars that parking will not be as serious of a problem. So that's just a few of my opinions on things.
Yeah, so Measure E and F, it's so important that we pass to lift the quality of life here in Isla Vista. Over the past several months, we've been hard at work going around and speaking with the residents of IV. And the number one thing that I can tell them, and what's on our t-shirts, is no more about us without us. For over 46 years, the community of Isla Vista has organized for greater self-governance. Currently serving on our single self-governing agency, the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District, has actually really influenced my perspective on this. And obviously I don't speak for the district here, but how I see it is Isla Vista deserves more than just parks and recreation. We get a lot done with a small special district, but we don't get to have a say in many of the services and areas of life in Isla Vista that we should. So I think it's going to be important for us to have a community services district established by Measure E that provide the 8 crucial services. And it's so important that we pass Measure F because without that, the agency will not be able to provide the important services. It's important that they both pass together in this one shot because this has been such a long-term battle. As far as what it will actually cost people, Measure F will be approximately between $5 and $10 a month per person, which is a fair amount to pitch in for the improvements that everyone will be receiving. Additionally, I think that the landlords should pay their fair share as well. Not all of these costs have to be passed on to the residents. So by creating this district, we will be able to provide much needed services.
Thank you. As both of them said about the programs and E&F itself, the student experience itself, though, how it would affect the students is that thousands of UCSB students and SBC students do live here, and this is our home. As everyone else said, if any of you live here, you know what a special, amazing place it is. But a big thing that we face every day, especially with our noise ordinance that came up, students would come up to me and say, who do we talk to? Like, where do we go? What happens from here? And having someone that they can relate to, someone that they can go to, someone that they can talk to. And when something goes wrong, you can come knock on my door. That's such an amazing thing. And having people that they feel genuinely represent them, actually taking hold of the community itself is so important. So students will have a say. Students, even if you're here for a couple of years, you'll be able to actually make an impact and see change in your community. So, thank you.
Okay, so the way I think that Measures E and F are going to affect students, I'll speak a little bit to how things get done in Isla Vista under the status quo. So the status quo is that we're an unincorporated area and we are governed by the county. We elect one representative to the Board of Supervisors, but we are not the only ones who that supervisor represents. We're about 1/3 of that supervisor's district. So it's a little bit different of a governing structure than probably the hometown that you came from. I think that student issues are Isla Vista issues. Much as Natalie was just referring to right now, people don't really know where to go when there's a problem. When we have Measures E and F passed, what you're going to have is a group of elected officials that you can hold accountable for fulfilling their promises, for working not just on the things that the CSD particularly can do, but also for working with the county and working with the university in partnership to get things done in Isla Vista. So I think that one of the phrases that I've heard recently is, of course, the infamous American colonies rallying cry, no taxation without representation, but There's also truly no representation without taxation. Measures E and F work in conjunction with one another, and it is just as important as everyone else has stated to pass both of them.
If both measures pass, as I'm certain they will, I will be happy to pay my tax up front, because this is a moment in history that must be. 45 years ago, we were not ready for this. And I am, of all of those on my slate and all the rest, uniquely in a position where I can observe that. We were not ready for it 45 years ago. But now there is a vision that is clear. And it is time that we exercise that voice that this slate is capable of. That we exercise that voice that I believe this community is capable of. And with the implementation of Measure E, with the implementation of Measure F, there will be a vehicle for a change that will be nothing less than historical. I have seen history in this place, and I'm not entirely proud of all of it, but I've seen history in this place, and this is a history that those students who are here, who have an opportunity to be a part of it, will be proud of for the rest of their lives. They will say, we were there when Isla Vista got its voice, where Isla Vista stood up and began to be a place that was a place to be proud of. And I feel honored to be in some small way a part of that, to speak to the continuity of it and its place in history. This is a historical moment, and it ought not to be missed. And Measure F's got to pass too, because it's worth paying to be there. Thank you.
So the question was specifically about students. However, I just really want to point out that students aren't the only demographic who live here, even though it looks like it will be making the majority of the board itself. The community of Isla Vista has a lot of marginalized communities, not from the families to other communities within the students themselves as well. And the thing about the CSD is that it doesn't have any real legislative power. And one of the most important things of it to me will be the Municipal Advisory Council, in which we will be able to appoint a set of people to keep in touch with the County Board of Supervisors, to discuss various issues with them, and kind of keep the Isla Vista climate at the forefront of their minds. And so when electing people to the board, you have to really be able to keep in touch with who is the kind of people who can reach out to those communities and who are the people who have proximity to those communities. Because having an elected representative is not about, going knock on their door. It's about them finding you and them working with you. As a co-organizer of the Student Actors Network that helped put on the Rally Against Rape Culture a couple of Fridays ago, there's a lot of different people in this community, from the co-ops to members of the LGBTQ community to other people who want to work on issues regarding feminism, or the people I'll be working with in Latinx Town Hall and hosting next week as well. These are the communities that we need to push forward, and they're the ones that need to be at the forefront of both tenant mediation and the Municipal Advisory Council, such that the Board of Supervisors and the landlords, or as some will say, slumlords of Isla Vista, really know what we need here.
Cool. So it's interesting that everybody brings up the fact that we will be gaining a voice. So Isla Vista has historically decided the supervisorial election. For example, some 8 years ago, it was decided by 800 votes right here in IV that determined the future, essentially, of this place. But still, we're forgotten. We are without voice. I would argue that what measures E and F do is provide some certain voices with a backing, a community backing. Basically, the fact that they are elected gives them the power to say to the county, we are the people in this election that were elected to represent your constituents. And if you want to be our representatives, you should be listening to us. And then it's really important to dissect what exactly we're saying, because those representatives that gain that voice, that speak, what they're saying will be critically important.
All right, good job, everyone. So our next question is, what experience do you have that qualifies you to serve as the next CSD director?
Okay, so I went through some of this in my opening remarks. I have been involved in the formation process. I was one of the people that voted on stuff that went into the bill. So if you have problems with it, you can hold me accountable. I have also taken part in the parking district meetings with Jay. I have done Isla Vista Community Center organizing with the Friends of the Isla Vista Community Center. I have spoken in front of the Board of Supervisors, in front of different university officials, in front of different county officials, from Drug Patrol to the UCPD to Alcohol and Drug Program to Title IX, etc., about Isla Vista, about our community. And I just hope to have the ability to do the same in the future.
So my run with politics has been a bit more from the grassroots level. I've worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign as well as actually Jay's campaign, which is another one of those uphill battles that we mentioned. But having been able to go to the DNC and talk to the delegates from the other side, the Hillary delegates specifically, about issues ranging from the Trans-Pacific Partnership to our terrible foreign policy in this country, to so many more things. I've constantly been putting myself in a position where it's a two-party system and a constant boogeyman that we always have to be afraid of that allows the Democratic side not to really ever listen to us or really give anything to our communities. Luckily, there's no boogeyman in the CSD race, really. And so I just want to be able to take that position as an elected official to be able to lobby more effectively against the Board of Supervisors in favor of Isla Vista and the needs of the multiple communities here. So as a co-organizer of the Student Activist Network, I will simply be organizing communities this entire year. It is really just a lifestyle that I have chosen for myself.
I have 40 years of advocating for folks on the margins. I could mention one endorsement that I have, and that's the St. Bridget Fellowship for the Homeless in Isla Vista. I can tell you the names of every homeless person in Isla Vista. They are my friends. I can tell you the names of the folks, many folks on Abrego. When the Laotian community came to Isla Vista, I was the only Caucasian at their New Year's celebration back in the 70s. When the Vietnamese community was here, they were my friends. But yet, on the other hand, Chancellor Yang is a friend of mine. On the other hand, I'm able to navigate the Board of Supervisors. I know the Chief Executive Officer of the County of Santa Barbara. I know the Sheriff. They are folks that I can work with, not just be in opposition to. I can advocate for the needs of this community that I love. I love this community. I'm going to stay here as long as I have life and breath. And I will advocate for the poor and for the needs of the larger community, and hopefully build some consensus to deliver the things that will make this a better place to live. I look forward to getting the opportunity.
So one of the things about myself is that I'm actually the youngest person who's currently running for a seat. I'm 19 years old. Yeah, thank you, Father John. So one of the main reasons I decided to run in the first place is because I really wanted to make sure that the genuine student experience was being represented on the Community Services District. I think that too often in the community and just in politics in general, it can be too easy to get caught up in the bubble. I want to make sure that as your representative, I'm actually representing you and your opinions about what should happen with our community. I think that I may not have the most experience out of anyone who's sitting here on stage, but I definitely do have the knowledge and the depth of knowledge for how to deal with policy issues, whether we're talking about planning or whether we're talking about public safety policy. And I think that something like the noise ordinance meetings that we hosted are good examples of the kind of representation that I would be able to provide to you.
Awesome. Okay, my freshman year, I was elected as an off-campus senator for Associated Students, representing about 1,000 or so Isla Vista students. So I became very involved with the community itself. And this year, I actually represent students as the internal vice president of Associated Students. And through that position, I've built a strong relationship with the university administration, and as well as the student body as a whole, and hearing the concerns and the needs of the students themselves. I'm also the only woman sitting up on stage right now, which I think really does say a lot, and hopefully in the future more women will be interested in running for a position like this. But I do believe I represent around 50% of Isla Vista community through that alone. And just like Spencer, I do believe that I represent the student experience. I understand what it's like to have housing and food insecurity. I work 2 jobs, I pay for my own tuition, I pay for groceries myself. And I understand that, and I feel like a lot of students, especially at UCSB with the high cost of tuition, are experiencing these struggles, and I think that through my involvement on the IVCSD, I'd be able to mitigate some of these issues and try and alleviate that for the students. Thank you.
Yeah, so a little over 2 years ago, I moved out here to Isla Vista from New Jersey. As did Natalie. And it's a very different place. But as soon as I got here, my first priority was to get involved. I've always been really passionate about helping people in various different ways. So when I moved out here, I first started helping out at a local church, University United Methodist Church, where since then I've become the worship leader and helped with the music ministry there. Also, within my first few weeks of arriving in Isla Vista, I began community organizing with the Yes on Measure P campaign to ban fracking and Lowest Caps for Congress. While working with those campaigns, I began connecting with Isla Vista community organizers working on self-governance. It was at that time that I attended my first Isla Vista self-governance town hall, at which point we hadn't even decided that a community services district would be the best option. And from there on out, I worked with the Isla Vista Self-Governance Initiative through the AB3 process for really ironing out the details of what this potential community services district could be. I also served as a senator on the Santa Barbara City College Associated Student Government, and during my first year as a senator, I created the Isla Vista Community Representative position, which I served in the following year. I've served on the Isla Vista Safe Task Force, which is the working group of county leaders in public safety. I've been a part of the Friends of the Isla Vista Community Center. I've worked on a number of community-driven projects, additionally as one of the directors of the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District. So with all of this, I have a lot of experience working in local government that I hope to continue. Additionally, I'm a member of the LGBT community, and I'm also a person of color, and those are both, I think, really important things to have in a representative of such a diverse community in Isla Vista. And I look forward to being able to put all this experience to good use.
So in my opening statement, I listed off a number of meetings that I had attended, but they were mostly from the perspective of the construction, for example, this district, understanding things related to this particular politics. I'll also point out that I attended a number of the town hall meetings where I met a number of the long-term residents. I was honored to have been invited to the kind of internal homeowners meetings that they started having, which started giving me a perspective on what the people who've been living here for the last 40, 50 years, what their needs are in the area. I also then, during my supervisor campaign, got a chance to attend a number of other kinds of meetings. I had been already attending meetings of the Local Agency Formation Commission, the body that was actually had to approve and construct a lot of the aspects of this district for a year and a half. I had started attending meetings of the Board of Supervisors itself. I've attended meetings of the Santa Barbara County Legislative Committee, things like that. Giving me an understanding of how operations work inside of the county, which is something that's going to be very important given that 5 of the 8 powers are things that are actually going to require working with the county in order to get constructed. One of the points that I made while I was running for supervisor is that we have a kind of demographic valley in the area. We do not have many people who are between the ages of 25 and 45. I was sitting directly in between there at the age of 34 currently, about to turn 35. This is just young enough that I feel I'm currently able to, still able, this will deteriorate, be able to connect with the students in the area, but it's also old enough that I typically get respect from the older people in the area that sadly is sometimes not given to students, which I disagree with, but it's just a reality. And then I just want to point out that my job function, what I do for a living, is I do online community management, and I try to teach people about the complicated legislative aspects of jailbreaking the iPhone, which involves teaching people about copyright law and how they can get involved with commenting with the Copyright Office, which is work that I try to continue here in Isla Vista through a Facebook page called IV is a City. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much, everyone. So our next question, you mentioned marginalized communities, the Latinx community. We were talking about students a minute ago, but we definitely want to, as a proposed CSD, address how you all will address these marginalized communities, the minorities. So I guess the question is, how will the proposed CSD affect non-student Isla Vista residents? Starting with Jay.
So one way is that there are currently services that are being provided by the university, such as the landlord-tenant housing mediation service, which are things that are not being provided to non-students. If you're in a situation where any of the people involved is a student, you can actually use the UCSB Community Housing Office, but if nobody is, there isn't that services being provided currently. That's something that we'll be able to provide. There are other possibilities of things that could be concerning, such as the parking permit program actually ended up having some very particularly negative effects possibly on areas of people in our community, possibly undocumented community. And so that's something that I want to really pay attention to and make certain does not happen. Things that I think are back on the positive side, so we have the power to contract for additional police services. I know there's been a lot of talk of contracting, essentially, we've been talking about students, for example, to work with houses in the area that might have noise complaints, but I think that there are some other options we should be paying attention to, whether it be a person who's dedicated for handling reports of sexual assault, which is something that I've sadly heard is sometimes ignored, or whether it be a Spanish-speaking community liaison officer. I know that was something that when we hired our community resource deputy, many people wanted a Spanish-speaking person, but the mechanism and the hiring process, the person we got, he was great, James McCarroll, but he doesn't speak Spanish, and so maybe that's something that we could try to supplement using this power. Another thing that ends up affecting a lot of people in the community is community center, and that's something that the community facilities power could help with, and that's something that I know that many people in the community families over on Abrigo have been very excited about, this community center, and that's something to look into providing with this district. But I do think that there are lots of interesting options there. Thank you.
So as far as how the Community Services District will affect non-students, I think this is something I have a good amount of information on. I'm now living in my third lease, and all of the spots that I've lived at in Isla Vista have been places where families live. My first 2 years I lived on Abrego Road. Now I'm living on Picasso Road. And one thing that I definitely see is a lot of the services that are available in this community, a lot of the cultural programming, and a lot of the really important resources as far as quality of life are aimed at UCSB students in particular. And I think that through all of the services provided by the CSD, we can really augment what's available to non-students, especially the community center for so many of the families who are raising young children, and also for the parents to connect. The tenant mediation program, I think, is going to be very important for non-students as well, especially with the history of the mass evictions in Isla Vista and the close quarters that a lot of our families are living in. Additionally, the Municipal Advisory Council will be very important for non-students because right now students have most of the political voice in Isla Vista. And I think it's important that it's not just students. Even though we are the majority of the community, it's important that we bring on long-term residents, and it's important that we bring on families, important that we bring on business leaders and nonprofit leaders as well. So I really think that we need to reach out to a diverse group with everything that we're doing. And I think also my experience as a Santa Barbara City College student shapes my understanding of not being provided with all of the services available in the community. Thank you.
I totally agree, especially about the services mainly being provided to students. By the Isla Vista Community Service District, because they are Isla Vista residents, will serve everyone equally, and that is amazing. Some things that I think are really important are the community center. The Pardal Center right now is at capacity. And I don't know when's the last time you were there. And there you'll see a yoga class, somebody trying to write a paper, and it is definitely at capacity. And having that space, not only for students and long-term residents, but also for families as well, is so important. In addition, police relations, I totally agree about having a Spanish speaker come on and being able to have those discussions and communication, as well as for the board itself being able to have translation services provided. And the tenant relations are so important, especially with the history of mass evictions, and making sure that the living conditions are of a high standard, especially with children living in them. It is so essential that we have these agreements made and laid out so that everyone has a high quality of living in Isla Vista. Thank you.
So we've all talked a little bit about the tenant mediation services. I think that that is going to be the number one thing for the undocumented community in Isla Vista, for any of the long-term renters living in Isla Vista, precisely because, as Jane mentioned, they don't currently have access to that right now. And frankly, even for UCSB students, the UCSB housing mediation program is notoriously underutilized. So I'll be really excited to see how we can implement that. In some of our conversations, we've talked to the Santa Barbara Rental Housing Mediation Task Force. They currently serve Goleta and Santa Barbara with mediation services. And they've indicated to us that over 100 calls a month come in from Isla Vista, and they're not able to do anything about it other than give the people on the other line information about their rights as tenants. They're not able to actually engage in the mediation process. I think that that will really, implementing that in Isla Vista will really be able to bring some real change to the culture of the way that landlords operate here in Isla Vista, especially for underrepresented communities.
For the goals that we share to implement the delivery of services to populations that have been underserved or completely not served, it is not as if we will have to recreate all of those here within Isla Vista. There are collaborative partnerships that we can forge with existing service providers. For instance, the Hosford Center at UCSB has begun to do some satellite work at the Teen Center. There are other sources of service within the community from UCSB, from other partnerships that we could forge, if we just know the right people to ask and get to them. And it becomes a matter, I hate to sound like Donald Trump, forgive me if it in any way sounds like it, but we got to make some deals. And for those kinds of advocacies that make those deals, you have to have people that know how to approach that. It certainly, here again, I would not say I'm Donald Trump, thank God, but I have been in a position to forge those kinds of partnerships. For instance, the delivery of Pescadero lofts in Isla Vista, housing for 32 formerly completely marginalized residents of our community, 32 formerly homeless folks. And that was a partnership that was advocated with others. We didn't build it all ourselves. We found partners out there and demanded our voice. And I'd love to have an opportunity to do a whole lot more of that.
So the police contracting power does come up a lot, and I don't have any interest in contracting police officers as we already see them in Isla Vista. We have to remember that just a year ago, a member of my community, the Latinx community, died in police custody because they were criminalizing him while he was bleeding out and gave him no care. So if we're going to be able to contract any further officers into Isla Vista, they need to be able to work much closer with the communities, and they need to be the type of individual who wouldn't criminalize anyone based off the color of their skin. And this is a very real danger for people to be talking about bringing in just more officers as is, because especially with the other members of the community, the children who live here, they face that risk of criminalization every day. Before coming to UCSB, I worked with mostly preschoolers and their families in San Fernando Valley for about 10 years, every summer where my mom worked. And the experiences of those families share are very similar to the ones that my neighbors share in Abrego. Just this past summer, some of my neighbors told me that the police had chased out the elotero, the gentleman who sells mangoes and espados and everything. I'm sure everyone's met him by now. Luckily he came back, but for a time the police were harassing him until he left. And in the valley, the police used to steal from them and destroy their carts for fun, really. So it's a very careful power that we need to be aware of, such that we don't increase the problems. And again, the tenant mediation program that was said, I think would be very crucial. As far as to my understanding, it was actually the Latinx families here in Isla Vista that created the first tenant union way back in the day. So I look forward to that problem as well.
Yeah, I guess I want to start off by saying Measure F is a little bit tricky in this respect because it imposes a regressive tax. So those families would be paying much more than the average student for the services that we would provide unless we impose a low-income exemption, which as of now I'm for, depending on its implementation. We also need to talk about the fact that some business owners actually live in very similar conditions, where there are 4 of them on the floor in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment because they cannot afford to live here, and their businesses are constantly being impacted by the fact that students leave, the fact that they don't purchase very much, the fact that major events are being crushed, and so perhaps, I mean, that's a whole legal issue, but I know that's a reason why some people are not. I've been a long-time advocate for the community center. We have done outreach to both families and long-term residents, and pretty much all constituents, I could say, throughout the past 12 years, which I say we, the community, has been doing this outreach. And the fact is that food security is going to be a huge issue this coming year. There was recently a report published that UC employees are something like 70% of them are food insecure, which Isla Vista is a high poverty area in the county of Santa Barbara. And we need to think about how we can kind of incorporate all of these solutions into our policy.
All right, good response from everyone again. So you were talking about finance a little earlier, and our next question is, what are the financial impacts going to be for all of the Isla Vista residents?
Cool. So it was mentioned earlier that it's like $5 to $10 a month. It's actually much less than that. They don't want to say that. It's simply because they have been put on the spot before in that respect. Because the median person in Isla Vista will have to pay something like $2.50 to $3 a month. It's something like $30 a year for the implementation of ENF. The problem is that a lot of it will go to administration, which is I really like the grant writer aspect of it, so like pay some money and then you might get more money in the future. Yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else to that question?
No, no.
Yeah.
Do you mean financial impact on the community?
Well, community, because we know that $2 to $3 $5, but outside of that.
As Andrew mentioned before also though, like we are talking about immediate costs. Families will be paying more simply because, you know, a student is one person, a family is a collective of people with children as well as the business owners here for their businesses. And as more solar panels come to Isla Vista, and I really hope they do, that'll actually also reduce the amount of money that goes to CSD. So the financial feasibility there also needs to be, you know, kept fresh and with new solutions coming all the time, because we do need those solar panels simply for environmental reasons. But as to the impact on the families, either an exemption for a low income that expands upon the already exemptions that you can find through Southern California Edison, as well as outreach programs to these families and any other low-income individuals to be able to find their way to those resources as well. We can't just put them online and hope for people to find them. That's a very privileged way of thinking, that people just have access to resources at all times. And as well as with the 7 out of 10 UC workers being, having food scarcity. I was just with the Teamsters Union, it was a couple days ago. My days are gone now. It was very early in the morning, but I was helping them strike by Henley Gate about their wages. And a lot of people who live here do work with the UC, and UC is not following up well on contracting with the workers for their higher wages that they need and deserve.
The model that has been there for the delivery of utilities of all kinds, whether it's telephone or electrical service or whatever, has sort of had that model of a sliding scale that did accommodate those who perhaps didn't have the resources to pay. I would certainly think that we would need to be responsive to something that accommodated all within the community. Not so much that the price would be paid, but that everyone would have a sense of buy-in and ownership in this community. That this was really our community. But I do believe that would need to accommodate those who did not have the resource to pay. That I think would be something we would have to be flexible and adaptive with. And also, I do believe that this is something that is, in many ways, an experiment that in community governance that is a well-informed experiment, that is the kind of thing that funders looking at this will see it for the gem that it is, and grant writing will not be difficult. Having been a part of many grants, I believe this one will be one that folks will want to put their hands on and support.
So, just as Father God is speaking of right now, this is definitely an experiment. One of the very unique things about our special district is that it was molded by Assembly Bill 3. One of the unique things that we can do because of that is levy a utility user tax rather than implementing, say, a parcel tax or a bedroom tax. So because of this, when you pay your utility bill, when you open it up, whether it's electric, trash, gas, you'll be able to see the tax coming out of it. I think that's really important for transparency purposes, so that you can see how much money that you're paying. One of the things that Isla Vistans Against Higher Taxes, which is a political committee that opposes Measure F, has been putting out recently, is that this is going to raise your rent. If you pay your own utility bills, this is not going to raise your rent. You'll be able to see the money coming out of your utility bills. And it would be completely wrong for any property owner or landlord to raise your rent by more than around $3 or $4, by more than the contribution that you are paying in via your utility bills. So I think that the financial situation for Isla Vistans is the most equitable that can be come up with. I as well support a low-income exemption, and I think that we should be doing the proper outreach to make sure that communities know about this.
I don't know about all of you, but when I think about a tax, I think about $30 to $60 being taken out of my paycheck. That's like my go-to when we talk about a tax. But this is different, and I just really want to hammer in that this is different, especially within our community, because you're going to actually be able to see the changes that are happening. A pothole in front of your house is probably going to affect your life much more than a lot of the money that you're going to be putting into bigger issues that we think of when we think of taxes. Something very special about the user utility tax, which is by far the most financially feasible tax method for the community service district, is that it does burden the landlords and the tenants alike. For example, with me, my landlord pays my water. And I think that that's great. There's going to be an investment from both the landlords and the tenants in creating a better Isla Vista and being able to see that investment directly within the community. So I think that's really special.
Thank you. So as has been mentioned, the amount that it's going to cost Isla Vistans per month is relatively low. And that's understanding that it shouldn't be more than $10 for really anyone. And for many of us, it might actually be around $5. But this is money only for Isla Vista improvements. And one thing that I think is very important to keep in mind, and something that we're very, it's actually incredible that this is what it will be, is this is a potential dedicated revenue source for Isla Vista. One that we don't have right now. Money that can consistently be counted on to come in for community improvements that can truly lift the quality of life for our residents. As far as the opposition to Measure F and the financial impacts, I just want to point out that Isla Vistans Against Higher Taxes is a political committee funded entirely by landlords. To our knowledge, there is not one Isla Vista resident on it. So it's very important to keep in mind what they're trying to do there. I do not believe that they're too concerned with paying the tax. I think they're more concerned with the accountability that will come from the Community Services District in regard to fair housing. And lastly, one thing I want to talk about is it's important for us to have this dedicated revenue source for Isla Vista because Isla Vista is not always a top priority of the county. Supervisor Farr has been a supervisor who has paid a lot of attention to Isla Vista and has treated it well. Joan Hartman, who's running for supervisor now, is someone who cares a lot about Isla Vista, and I think we can depend on her to serve us well. But we will not always have a county that's focused on Isla Vista, so it's important for us to have this financial source for community improvements.
All right, so a few comments on things that have been said. Natalie had mentioned that this was the financially feasible approach. I think it's probably what you kind of meant, but it's more like the politically feasible approach. There are other financially feasible ways of doing this, but in order to try to hit the landlords and the tenants equally was one of the political goals. It's saying that it was financially feasible is, I think, always an interesting one, which I'll get to in a second. Spencer had mentioned that this will not raise your rents because utilities are paid by the tenants. That's actually not often the case. Most people do not pay their own water bill. Most people do not pay their own trash bill. The trash bill is actually a sufficiently large one in the area that it's actually like it's even a mandated trash service because landlords are trying to skimp on it. But Spencer is correct that it shouldn't raise your rent more than the amount of percentage, of course, that the utility actually cost, which shouldn't be all that much. Now, however, for students and for people who are more dependent, Michael made a very good point about families being hit a little bit harder. This is in fact what's known as a regressive tax. Regressive taxes are taxes that affect people on lower income more heavily than people on higher income because everyone has about the same utilities that they're using, but people make different amounts of money. Also, if you are an older person who might even be in a larger house that you might even want to move from but can't because you've got Prop 13 protection on your property tax, which makes it affordable for you to be there, maintaining the utilities on that house can actually be more expensive. And some of the older people in the area have reported very high amounts that they've calculated, well over $100. And finally, I wanted to point out that for businesses, businesses in the area are feeling very concerned about this because they pay $10,000 sometimes a month on electricity bills and gas bills for their cooking and for their ingredients, and that's something that will hit them very hard.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So some of you mentioned that the CSD will be something of an experiment. With that, how would you set the precedent for the CSD? And also with that, how would you imagine the CSD looking in 10 years?
Set a precedent for the CSD. Well, I would hope that we are all very professional and we all do our job very well. As far as setting a precedent, we would like to hit the ground running and try to actually make good change. It's always, when you see the Isla Vista Community Council from back in the 70s and you see some of the early successes they had, it was great that they set a precedent for later work. But I guess I'm not entirely certain on how to continue answering that part of the question. But the other part of the question, I'm sorry, can you mind me to say
Yeah,
that?
no problem. Like, the question is essentially, how would you lay the foundation?
Yeah, so the second half
Where
is
would it go in 10
where would we be
years?
seeing in 10 years? So this district is mostly about contracting. A lot of its powers are things that we can fund, they aren't things that we do. And that's something that I think when you look forward into what this district is going to be doing, we're going to be spending a lot of our time doing contract renegotiation, dealing with the staffing unions for our general manager and for our financial officers. We will be making less and less large-scale strategic decisions. This is something where we might start seeing politicization of the board, people who are essentially running because they want control over a little bit of police in the area, or they want control over a little bit of the parking program because they really have a grudge to bear on one of these issues. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see how different the first couple of years of this is going to be from the subsequent parts of this district. Because even like the Municipal Advisory Council, we wouldn't be running that. Municipal Advisory Council is something we'd be funding. And then the Board of Supervisors would make all decisions about how that would actually work. We'd have some leverage because we're providing the money. But we wouldn't actually be making the decisions on how that operates. And so I think sometimes people glorify what we will be doing on this board when you look into the future. So.
Thank you. So I do have a little bit of a different take on this one. I think that as we come in, as the inaugural board of directors for the Isla Vista Community Services District, we are going to have a lot of responsibility for designing these programs and for prioritizing which services we want to hit the ground with. With 8 services to choose from, there's a lot of work for us to do. And I think it's going to be important for us to prioritize a few to really tackle up front and to have a few that we also do more research and development in the beginning stages on. As far as moving forward, in 10 years, I hope that we can have a community where it's much more fair to live, a community where residents feel that they have a greater civic responsibility that actually results in what they want and that's actually representative of them. I really do believe that when we have this opportunity to create the district and to really set a precedent, it's important that we have a board that works together and that's willing to compromise too. We have a lot of different people who will be on the board, and we're obviously representing a very diverse community. So it'll be important for us to all work together. However, I do think that we will have greater ability to design these services, and I think going on we will be doing more than just contract renegotiation.
So something I think is super important is setting a really high standard of professionalism, cooperation, compromise that I hope to continue into the future. That's just, I think, a standard that we should set for this year. Something I also hope for the future, if I were to talk about 10 years from now, would be that I would hope that the board itself wasn't having to fix things, but instead protecting the services and making them better and maintaining and making sure that all the Isla Vista residents feel included and heard instead of actually having to develop the programs themselves or change them. So I would hope that it's just about perfecting it and making sure that everyone in Isla Vista feels happy and represented.
I think that one of the unique responsibilities that we are all going to have should we be elected as the first board is that we're going to have to make sure that it's a priority that we set, or that we cultivate a positive relationship with the county and the university, rather than being adversarial. If you look at some of the history and the way that this is played out, particularly in the 1970s with the community council, my take on it is there was a certain lack of compromise and an adversarial approach which didn't really get anybody anywhere. It reads nice in the history books, but here we are in 2016 and we're still an unincorporated area. We're still doing self-governance. So I think setting that positive relationship is really important. It's also very important that we make sure that we hire a dedicated general manager, because that general manager is going to be such a large part, possibly more important than us, in terms of getting the district set up. There's a lot to do, and so I really hope that we can find someone for the job. I'm confident that we will be able to.
You asked a question that at first I could not have answered, and I don't think any of us really could answer. What will we see in 20 years? What will it be like? What do we see? I foresee that Isla Vista may yet be a place that people actually move to because it's a lovely place to live. That people move to because it's a safe place to live, where they have a voice. I foresee a day where students will stay here, not just the dinosaurs like me, that I had a bit of insanity perhaps to have stayed here as long as I have. But people will actually stay here because they realize that this is a place that just might be home. This just might be a place to have your family. This just might be a place that was safe enough to stay. And in 20 years, if I get the chance to be around, I'd love to see that.
So the question on precedent is a bit of an interesting one to me. We talk about being adversarial and not, and I believe that that's kind of directed towards me in the way that I mentioned lobbying against the board of supervisors. I believe that you can be adversarial and still work with them. I can easily say that the university does not represent my Latinx community. That doesn't mean I wasn't able to go through successful 6 hours of negotiations with the chancellor, 3 vice chancellors, and 10 other administrators for the reforms that I did this past spring. However, a lot of the reason why I wanted to really just kind of push myself into this race is because of as we talk about precedents, the precedent I saw the people who were creating the CSD make when they attacked the Parks Board district earlier in about June to July. The Parks Board wanted to continue their bedroom tax in order to continue funding the district while also creating like a secondary water line so that they would be able to use clean water as opposed to regular water, which is very important with the drought and everything right now, and just environmentalism in general. And what the county Democrats came in and did was use smear and fear tactics, saying the Parks Board wasn't engaging the community at all, that their website was bad, and just all these other things. And just the anxiety I could see on the board members' faces while they did that was really just showed me how disgusting politics can get around here. And there's already a precedent with the county Democrats being so involved in the CSD that will be what the CSD is like. And I don't like that level of bureaucracy in a local governance. They have every right to, help here and there, but they shouldn't be more involved than anyone else who endorses a candidate. And so in setting these precedents, I hope that the CSD will be much more apolitical and simply serve the community.
Community Services District. So I want to echo Michael's thoughts in terms of, grassroots advocacy. Because a big part of being an activist is knowing when to say no. It's not just compromise, but also taking a stand for what you believe in, and not being afraid of the powers that be when they crack down. Essentially, Isla Vista has been told no a lot, and we do have leverage, as Jay said. We do have a sort of a play to get more services, more involvement from the county. But at the same time, yeah, we can only do 3 things without them. And managing those relationships, making sure that people are being constructive, but also taking apart the status quo and examining it for what it is incredibly important. To address the second part of the question, what I see Isla Vista as, yes, I echo Father John's comments. I want it to be safe and happy and like a tourist destination, because when my family comes here, I get upset if I can't take them into the butterfly preserve or like along the beach or trails, because this place is incredible. It is like nature, wild. And it's just harnessing that power that we do have and balancing it with what we don't.
I totally agree. Isla Vista is Shangri-La. That's what my dad calls it whenever he visits me. All right, so our next question is going to be, what is your first priority for representing Isla Vista? What issue are you most passionate about addressing in Isla Vista? Oops.
Cool. I have 3 things that I usually talk about. My number 1 is also usually policing, because the way that the students experience it, it's very prevalent in their negative perception of Isla Vista, and the same is echoed by the long-term residents and families that live here. So it kind of seems like we have this thing that nobody really likes, and it's a duty of our representatives to talk to those that make those decisions and make sure that we're heard. Essentially, I'm in favor of, yes, a mediative task force of student volunteers, we could say, or they could be paid like CSOs to go out and talk to people, provide some sort of buffer, but also a reprioritization of what the sheriffs are doing, where they're going, why they are congregating on Delphi, and why large events are being overpoliced in such a way. A statistic I like to throw out is that in 2006, around then, when policing, the levels of crime were essentially the same as they are now, the amount of police during a Halloween event was something like 90 officers, and last Deltopia had over 300, I believe. So essentially it's a 3-fold increase in policing when we're not seeing the same crime statistics. And now that it is decreasing, we should definitely keep going. We should push it. We should make sure that although we are staying safe, although there is a shortage of police when times are not at their peak, there is also this over-exuberance to police, to crush our students.
Sorry, I started thinking about North Dakota once they were having our police. What was the question again?
What is your first priority for representing IB? What issues are you most passionate about?
All right, police do kind of fall into that, because as I said, I was immediately thinking of North Dakota and the First Nation protesters protesting against the access pipeline. And today, police came upon these sound cannons, put in a no-fly zone, and are basically now the National Guard. And we have this militarization of police come on these, Halloween that we'll be seeing soon. The rain might, keep things down, as it did a couple of years ago. And Deltopia as well. And at the same time, though, yes, there's not enough police to really kind of maintain on the day-to-day basis. But I personally like the CSO model a lot more, and would like to see, I would love to see police officers who don't carry guns, where they're a certain community, who actually know everyone there, who can speak Spanish, and I really hope that the contracting ability we'll have will give us a little bit of leverage on bringing those type of people in. Otherwise, my more passionate issues about IB tend to fall into the culture itself of IB. As I mentioned before, I was one of the main organizers for the rally against rape culture, and where I was able to help create a space for others to be able to use as a platform for their issues. As I'm actually someone who benefits from toxic masculinity, I do my best, however, to throw that away. There's a lot of misogyny, homophobia, and so many other things that come up with a certain kind of culture that we have. And in the essence of creating a better sense of self-governance and bringing more people involved, I just really hope that it allows us to empower other members within this community to start taking more charge within the community. So there's so much more you can do than just working on CSD.
When I've been asked this question by folks down at the West End, you know, okay, so what of this are you passionate about? I have typically ticked off all of the elements of Assembly Bill 3 because all of them are things that I'm passionate about. I believe they all ought to get delivered. But the one that I love the most, that really, when we talk in terms of passion, it ought to at least have a certain element of love, not just, I mean, you really ought to have a sense that this is something that I would love to see happen. That would be the community center. I believe that for too long, this community has not had that place that was common to us all, that place that every citizen of Isla Vista could look to and say, this is the manifestation of our home. We all can come to this place and be comfortable here. We all can come to this place and receive services here. And every once in a while, all of our representatives will get together. And as the former tenant of the place that is hopefully to be our community center, I believe that it's in continuity with what we saw when we first came here back in the 60s and 70s. It is that place that's the hub of the community. I'd love to see this place have a hub, a place that that stuff came out from that was good for the whole of the community.
So I think I will say right off the bat that my top 3 priorities for this district are the tenant mediation program, getting that off the ground, developing a comprehensive community policing program, and making sure that we work with the county to implement the MAC and an area planning commission so that we have a voice to the county and more control over the development process. I kind of want to go a different direction with this question though, because one of the things that I felt for a long time is that in our desire to advocate for issues that happen in Isla Vista and to try to make it a better place, a lot of time it doesn't seem to me like we recognize how great of a place it is. I still remember the first time that I ever saw Isla Vista, and I was with my dad and we were driving down Del Playa on a Friday night, which we quickly realized it wasn't something that we would ever be doing again. But I think that Isla Vista that I saw and the Isla Vista that I continue to see is something that I really love. And I think that in our pursuit to improve it, we don't need to bash it that much, you know? I think that we can be constructive. These 3 priorities that I have, community policing, tenant mediation program, and the MAC and Area Planning Commission, they're always to improve it, not to fundamentally transform it. And I think, yeah, like I said, the tenant mediation program should be the #1 priority of our board.
I was hoping that someone would have said the graffiti abatement program by now, so I'm banking on you two. Something that I feel most passionately about, which I totally agree with Spencer, I love Isla Vista. It's my home and I love it. But something that definitely does need to be improved is our housing and tenant mediation programs. Last year, during winter quarter, like I said, I paid for school and food and everything else by myself. I was actually evicted from my home and couldn't afford school, so I ended up having to take a quarter off to couch surf around for a little while, which definitely, it's a student experience, it's something that happened, definitely not the end of the world, but finally getting my bed, like my amazing, nice, full-size bed, and just seeing cockroaches scurry up the wall and clear building issues in my house, and then being informed about that and bringing it to my landlord, getting a text message that says, "You're getting evicted." I'm serious, I got a text message. I don't think that's legal. And I know that that's an experience of other students, is that there's an intimidation factor with the landlords and actually getting knowledgeable and knowing what's going on. And I know, like, what, you want to evict me? I can't sue you. I can't afford it. There's no way that I can potentially ever afford a situation like that. So having that tenant mediation program and being able to establish those standards so that I and other students don't have to walk into a house that is infested with roaches and termites and other vermin would be great. And I definitely think that this would serve the entire community. I feel so passionately about getting this off the ground and making sure that it gets started right away.
So me and Spencer actually share some common ground with our 3 top priorities. I too am for advancing community-oriented policing, changing what our current rental housing situation is, and then also amplifying the voice of Isla Vista through the Area Planning Commission and MAP. But with that, my top priority is definitely community policing. And a little bit about myself, actually, most of my childhood I wanted to be a police officer. And I was always really interested in law enforcement and public safety. So I was always doing a lot of reading and research about it. As I grew up, I was no longer interested in that as a profession, but still very interested in public safety. And thus far, I mean, I've served on the Isla Vista Safe Task Force, which has really opened my eyes to a lot of our successful public safety efforts, but also a lot of challenges. And additionally, through working with students at Santa Barbara City College, we worked through my time there to develop a program similar to what we want to do here in Isla Vista, and similar to what they already have going on at Cal Poly SLO, with a student neighborhood assistance program, where we have non-sworn, unarmed police personnel working side by side with law enforcement officers to really reach out to the community in a less confrontational way, and to also help prioritize resources. A lot of times we don't need armed police officers going to tell people to turn the music down. A lot of times we don't need armed police officers going out on the street to someone who looks a little too intoxicated to see if they need help. I think it's important that we really focus on law enforcement efforts that are going to truly lift up the quality of life. Additionally, I think it's important that we are supportive of the Isla Vista Sobering Center project through our community policing efforts, because that's one of the biggest areas that we see difficulty in right now with how we're treating public intoxication.
All right, so I've had the time to sit here and try to really nail down my 3 priorities. So I believe it was 3 or 4, people have been using 3. And I would say that they're honesty, efficiency, and leverage. Let me explain what I mean by that. So I want to make certain that people understand what they can get out of this district and what they can't. So as an example of that, if you're having issues with your landlord and you've already established communication with them and they're messing with you and you wish you had some kind of power to push back at them, this district can't do that. This district is going to provide mediation services, which is kind of like couples counseling between you and your landlord. If you can sit down with a person and at a table, now maybe they can help work out issues because they understand the thought processes involved. But it's not going to provide arbitration, and it's not going to even provide necessarily the advocacy that like the Isla Vista Tenants Union might. Efficiency, so I want to look at things like the community center maybe should be better off at the park district. So the community center is something that will require staffing, and it is the only power, when I look at all the powers, that actually will require staffing. The park district already has staffing. They already deal with negotiating with the unions over all their staffing issues. They already maintain a ranger program, and they already deal with emptying trash bins and things like that. I think that they would be a much more efficient place to put the community center. And I think that they also kind of have more better synergy anyway as far as like recreation programs and other forms of the facility. They maintain buildings already. And leverage, I really think we need to figure out how to use this district in order to get the things that we need from the county. And so we can use that from our funding power. I mean, like we're taxing ourselves and using that money. And so we need to figure out how to get municipal advisory council, and we need to figure out how to actually get the sheriff's department to do what we want when we tell them what we want stuff with the police department. Even when the supervisors tell the sheriff's department, we're giving you money, here's the budget, they still don't get what they want. So we need to figure out how to actually build some leverage in order to get what we want. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much. So now we're going to open the questions to the audience. If the audience has any questions they'd like to ask the candidates. If not, we have conclusion statements from each of the candidates.
I have a question.
Yes, Tara.
So you were saying that this utility tax is not the most financially feasible. What would be financially feasible for a tax? Like what would work best if it wasn't the utility tax?
So the issue with using the word financially feasible is twofold. One of which is that the financial realities to the not users, the utility users, the people who are paying the tax is variable and complex, and it is a regressive tax. There were tax options that were on the table that we discussed that were not felt to be quite as politically feasible, that would not have had the regressive properties. Things such as the Fed tax, I believe, was one of the examples. There's another issue, which is then the financial feasibility to the district. When using that term kind of ends up making it sound like the whole thing is very financially feasible because of the way the tax operates. It doesn't generate that much money, and the question always is how can we figure out how to limit the overhead? Which is one of my big priorities is efficiency, is to minimize the overhead. Because we did a financial feasibility study, and the financial feasibility study is showing us that more than half of the money is going to be spent on overhead. And so you can imagine, if nothing else, if you had more money, you'd be more financially feasible. But it's just using the term financially feasible. I just wanted to politically feasible, and I think that's what we're going for anyway. Like it's not complaining as much as I just want to make certain that the audience understands.
Actually, I have a question as well for both. Sorry, for Jay and Spencer. It seems that both of you have different visions or expectations, rather, for the tenant mediation program. Could you elaborate more on that? I suppose it seems that Jay, you described it as couples counseling, while Spencer seemed to have more of maybe I'm wrong, higher expectations of the program. How would you see that would happen, Spencer, and Jay? How would you improve on what we already have that UCSB provides?
Well, I would say that I think that calling it couples counseling sells it a little bit short, mainly because a lot of the things that frankly are going on that are landlord-tenant issues are frankly the landlord's fault. We're dealing with the landlords who are absentee and aren't keeping up the properties, aren't keeping them up to health and safety codes. So if you're a tenant in that position and you have some sort of documentation and evidence that you are being wrong, then the service definitely would be able to help you. Of course, this is meant to be standing for the fact that very few people in Isla Vista, have the father that's a lawyer or the resources to hire one, or the ability to write a legal notice. So I think that I think it's more of a clarification of rhetoric, although I don't know, I could be misunderstanding. Also, another one of the things that we would be able to do down the line in terms of improving the housing situation is hire a code enforcement officer. I'm sure that everyone has seen a property in Isla Vista, whether it be a lofted bed, or just like one of my friends was telling me the other day, he found mold growing in his bathroom that his landlord had painted white paint over. None of those things are up to code. So I guess a code enforcement officer wouldn't necessarily be walking inside people's bathrooms. It would certainly help in terms of holding landlords accountable. Isla Vista is the only place in the county where you see these kinds of dire conditions, and part of that is because there is a very large population of people who are first-time renters. They haven't really been through the process before. They've never been through the process of signing a lease. I know that just, less than a year ago, I was going through trying to research exactly what is normal to be in a lease, what are clauses that sound sketchy, are they actually sketchy, or are they just, par for the course? So I think that this leads to a kind of culture among the landlords that allows them to really take advantage of students. Any protections that we can put in place for, of course, not only students, but anyone who's a renter in Isla Vista will be such a gain for our community.
So first of all, I'll say code enforcement is a separate power, it's a separate issue, and it's not one of the initial powers that we'll be able to have, but hopefully we will get it later and then decide what to do with it. It is an ethically challenging power. We've had people from the county come and talk about code enforcement issues, and they point out the same thing that some of us have pointed out, that when you start doing code enforcement, that leads to evictions of people who might already have some housing issues, and that is something that you have to decide, you have to balance with the benefits that it comes with. But as far as the actual the rental mediation housing task force type power, it's not actually just a difference in rhetoric. So, like Spencer mentions that it's the landlord's fault. Okay, what are we going to do about it? What does the mediation program able to do about it? So I ended up giving a presentation at one of the 83 meetings. It's an hour-and-a-half long presentation where more than a third of it was spent on this power, looking into the history of the housing issues in the area. And by the way, the Santa Barbara Rental Mediation Housing Task Force, one of the volunteer mediators that you might actually get was for many years, not currently, Chuck Eckert, who happens to be one of the people who is trying to stop this district that was mentioned earlier and is one of the key landlords here in Isla Vista. The goal of the mediation program is not to advocate for the tenant, it's to provide a safe space for the two parties to be able to sit down. And for its work, that is the power of the mediation program, is that they're more likely to get the landlord to sit down because they understand where the landlord's coming from. Many of them are landlords. And that way they can use the connections and leverage to actually get them to sit down and listen to you and try to translate between the two. But I think it actually really does start to sound like couples counseling. People keep talking about it as if it's going to provide some kind of arbitration ability, some kind of actual legal power against them. This power, by the way, actually is in the district because I brought up bringing up a rent board as a power that a city could have, and then the Dots Williams came back and said, well, we can't do a rent board in the CSD, but you know what we can do? We can do rental mediation housing task force type contracting power. So that's what I spent a lot of time thinking about this power.
Perfect. Thank you both.
Cool. Okay. I just wanted to bring a couple of things up. What the tenant mediation power can do. A great thing is the promotion of this idea in the community. So it was brought up that some 100 people currently call and receive just superficial services. I believe that the task force itself came to us with a number of like 20, 25 people that would actually be mediated every year. But what it does is it provides the resources, the money, for that group to do public outreach in Isla Vista about these issues. And I'm passionate about that.
So now we're going to have a final 1-minute conclusion from each of the candidates, and that'll wrap this forum up. So whoever has the mic can start. Jake, you can begin.
Well, I guess one thing, I am running unopposed, so I'm not entirely certain what my goal right now is, interestingly. I didn't think this through very well. I'm excited about what we might be able to accomplish. I am definitely excited about being able to work with whoever is elected from this stage. I don't know everyone up here, but I know many of them. I don't know Natalie very well, for example, but I talked to Ethan. I've been working with Ethan and Spencer and Andrew and Michael for a long time, and I've had occasion to talk with John. These are all very great people that are up here, and I'm very excited about what we do.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for your time and attention tonight, for inviting us all to come out and address you. This has been an amazing experience. I too, while I do have an opponent who we will be on the ballot together, he's suspended his campaign, so it looks like my race is not too tight. So I want to spend these next few seconds really just speaking about how proud I am to be running alongside Natalie, Spencer, and Father John. And I'm really excited for the work that we've been able to do as running mates, and I'm excited to really get behind them and help get them elected, to help pass Measures E and F, and to also ensure that we have many progressive leaders representing our community, including Joan Hartman for supervisor and Cindy Carvajal for Congress. We have a working group of leaders, and it's important that we elect people who will be representative of our values as Isla Vista.
Standing up for this one. Okay, I'd really like to thank you all so much for having me here tonight. When I first came to Isla Vista, I flew 3,000 miles from New Jersey as well. And my first stop was actually, we couldn't find the campus. So we ended up at Sands Beach, and it was like right at sunset. It was like the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And I remember like telling my family, I was like, you guys are coming here for Christmas this year, because I'm like never leaving for the rest of my life. I love Isla Vista, and I feel like I have the passion and the experience to take on a position like this. And I would genuinely be honored to serve you for the Isla Vista Community Service District Board of Directors. Thank you so much.
So, I guess I'll do my closing statement like this. I'm a history buff. And I've done a lot of reading about Isla Vista, how it's progressed. I've talked to a lot of different people. I've spent way too many hours that I'd like to admit in the UCSB Library Special Collections section on Isla Vista. And I have to say that I am just ecstatic that self-governance is a prospect that can finally happen. And I'm ecstatic that measures E and F are even on the ballot. I think that for a lot of people here, because our community is so transitory by nature and it's the student population, people usually stay for around 4 years and then move out. I think that maybe some of the significance of what we're about to do is getting lost. This is the first time that we're going to have an elected body of people in Isla Vista that'll be able to deal with some of the everyday issues that people face. I'm incredibly proud to be serving alongside, or running alongside rather, Ethan, who's done excellent work on the Parks Board, Natalie with her UCSB Associated Students Executive experience. I really admire that. And Father John, you, I mean, excuse me for saying this, but you are history, you know? You're in the history books, and I admire that so much.
Well, thank you.
Tread carefully.
It is kind of amusing that the slate I'm running on, there are 3 combined ages or less than mine. But several in my family have pointed that out. This is a historical moment. It truly is, and we ought not to miss that. And everyone who's up here is a part of the writing of that history. There is no one on this stage that is not qualified to be a part of that history. And we will broaden that history to include the entire community. We will reach out, and this will be expanded. It will be greater than what we have envisioned. I am particularly in awe of my slate, of Ethan, of Natalie, and Spencer. They have brought to this an enthusiasm that comes from the heart. This isn't just a senior project. You know, this is something where they truly recognize, and I do believe everyone on the stage here recognizes how important this is, that we do have a trust that we may be given, and I love the opportunity. Thank you all.
I do just want to echo the thoughts of how beautiful Ivy is. I've always gotten very angry when people called Ivy a ghetto, because first off, I believe they've never been to a ghetto. And also just how beautiful Ivy is and how many people that want to do something for the community actually do live here. However, one of the most important things I find for the CSD that will be more revolutionary to me is the ability to more effectively lobby with or against the board of supervisors to help this historically underserved community. Freedom and self-governance is truly in resistance, and all real change that has occurred in our nation's history has been through grassroots movements and civil disobedience, because when it comes from top down, it still reflects the issues from the previous system. And being able to work on the CSD and lobby in that essence while working with Actors Network to really try to bring change to this community, I hope that we can really do a lot, and look for us in November for something big planned.
Cool. So I guess I came into this thinking about time. I had actually just watched a Rick and Morty episode about time. In any case, so there's this great thing. So essentially, I talked about the critical nature of the fact that you have to pick a voice that represents you. And you put it well, we're all qualified to represent, but at the end of the day, you do have to fill in a little bubble that states that this is the person that you believe in the most. And I just ask that you look at the history. It's great to see, I guess I'll speak for myself because it's a closing statement, that I have been involved in community efforts. I continue to be involved in community efforts through things like Jeffrey's Fast Coffee House, alleviating the party culture, to the community center, helping provide food to residents, and will continue to do so regardless of what happens. I hope that I'm giving a platform.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for the candidates, and thank you for the